Welcome everyone, thanks for joining today. It's great to have you with us for our A Day in the Life of a Transport Engineer Lightning Talk series. So we've got five awesome speakers to talk to you guys today about kind of their career in transport, how they got into transport and some of the different types of projects that they're working on and their kind of lessons to you. I actually found out about transport as a career from an event very similar to this one. So these sessions are always a big a passion of mine to get organized. Such a great way for people to kind of find out about how exciting it is working in transport. So this is just one of a few of our Engineering New Zealand's Lightning Talk series. So make sure you check out Engineering New Zealand's website to have a look at any other upcoming Lightning Talks if you're interested in finding out about other industries and not just transport. So this event is also being run alongside the transportation group. So I'm the secretary for the Auckland Northland local branch. And yeah, just a shout out to make sure that you join our group so that you can take advantage of attendance at conferences, local branch events, and kind of involvement in preparing submissions on major issues. So we'll have a presentation from 5 speakers. After that, we'll then do the kind of Q&A panel session where we'll go around and answer your questions. So as Holly said, make sure you drop in your comments as you go. You can keep them generic or ask for, a question to a specific presenter if there was something, someone said and you wanted to find out a bit more. And yeah, use the Q&A function in Zoom. So with that, I'll hand now to our first speaker, who is Michael Woodward.
Cool. Thanks, Hamish. So I'm Michael Woodward. I am working at WSP as a transportation engineer with just over 2.5 years of experience. So from a young age, I always knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an accountant just like my dad. But then after doing that, I realized it wasn't really what I was wanting to do. I was wanting to be in a role where I could solve problems and face new challenges each day. So that pushed me down the engineering pathway. And initially I was moving towards a structural engineering role. But then I found with transportation, it's more big picture and it's more people focused, and that really appealed to me. I had 3 internships when I was at university, so 2 with contractors, Citycare and Downer. And that gave me a good understanding of the construction environment. But I was keen to experience consulting, and I've interned at Becker. I graduated at the end of 2019 and started working at WSP at the start of 2020. And that's me on the right celebrating the end of uni. So when I started at WSP, I was in the structures asset management team, and that's involved with getting the best value for money out of existing roading assets. So on the left, you can see a nice photo of a bridge. I did quite a lot of bridge inspections in my first year looking at that. I was also involved in project feasibility reports where we would look at an asset, so it could be a bridge, retaining wall that had deteriorated, and suggest solutions. So that example on the top right was a rural bridge in Warkworth where a milk tanker had crashed off the side. So we were looking into options and making recommendations to Auckland Transport. And I was also involved with coordinating inspections and managing the program. So it's a good experience there. I then got involved with crash risk screenings, and this has been one of the most interesting projects I've been on. So we prepared a screening template to assess crash risk for bridges on state highways. And you can see a breakdown of the factors there. And it created a real valuable tool. And what we've been doing is promoting it with local councils, and I've been involved with screenings of their network. So we identify high risk bridges where crashes are likely to occur, and then propose solutions. And you can see that photo on the right, that was just last week. I had the opportunity to present at a conference, so it's been a real good project to be a part of. But I was keen to move into the road safety space. I was looking ahead and thinking of I'm keen to get chartered as a transportation engineer. So I've been involved with a bunch of road safety audits where we look at a design that's been prepared by another consultant and critique it from a road safety perspective. So this is just an example here of us doing visibility checks on site. And it gives you a good perspective of the road safety hazards for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. And I've found it's been valuable experience in informing my own designs. So Northwestern Bus Improvements is a project that I spend most of my time on, and it's about a $50 million project on State Highway 16, where bus lanes are getting put on the motorway shoulders, and at Te Atatu Road and Lincoln Road interchanges, the existing traffic islands are being reconfigured to install bus stops around the place. And what that will enable is Auckland Transport to run a lot more buses through the area, and those buses can get in and out of city quicker. So my involvement on this project, initially I was involved with a lot of construction monitoring work. So that would be going out to site and making sure that things are being constructed as per the plans. And that involved a mix of day and night work. You can see a few construction photos from that period. And then over time, I've become more involved with managing design queries. So about the design, or sometimes there's surprises on site that force you to adapt. And I've also done a lot of contract management and project management work on this project. So it's been a real great thing to be involved with. And being on a big project, it's meant I've learned a lot, not just about transportation work, but also about everything from stormwater to electrical to landscape architecture. Pathways is a real cool organisation within WSP, and it's focused on career development for emerging professionals. And in 2020, I was on the office committee, and then I led the Auckland office in 2021. You can see on the left, that's us doing sort of a fun team building activity. But we've also been able to run a lot of events, such as the one on the right, where we had a panel of senior WSP staff who shared about their experience working with clients. So here's just a few of the lessons that I've learned from my time working at WSP as a transportation engineer. The first thing would be that communication and working with teams is really, really important. I think through uni, you can, if you're quite smart, you can do really well just by yourself and just working on your own. But in the workplace environment, it's really important that you work well with a range of different people from different backgrounds and communicate to them well. Often a project manager is not wanting to know the specific details about what you're doing, but they're focused on the big picture and the implications of it. The second thing I've learned is it's really important to take notes and document everything. You never know when you're going to need to call back on that and understand the justification for things that have been done. It's really important to have paper trails for the work that you do as well. It's often easy to forget what you were doing last week, let alone multiple months back. Thirdly, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and once you start work, there's a good chance that you'll end up getting thrown in the deep end on something that you're not too familiar with, or that it's different from what you've learned at university. I'd say make the most of it. You learn a lot from those experiences, and yeah, some of my best experiences have been in situations where I've been out of my depth, but I've had that support and have been able to grow. And then my final point is don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's inevitable that when you start work, there will be mistakes that you make. I remember when I started work, particularly in my first year, there were things that I was getting stressed about at the time, and now I look back at it and think, why was I getting stressed about that in the first place? You learn a lot from making mistakes, and yeah, hopefully when you start out, there should be a good network of people around you to support you and help your development. Cool, so thank you for listening. I've added my email address and LinkedIn if there's not enough time in the Q&A, so feel free to reach out if you've got any questions about working at WSP or my experience and what I've talked about today.
Thanks, Michael. That was awesome. I really liked your point about transport being about people. I think that's a really important point. All right, our next speaker is Julia Lockhart.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Julia. I'm a civil engineer working in the transport sector at Mott, MacDonald, Auckland. I also studied civil and environmental engineering at Auckland Uni and finished at the end of 2019. Going into engineering, I wasn't sure kind of what subjects I would take, yet alone what specific sector I would be working in. So I've put on the slide an outline of my 3 years in the specific civil engineering specialization. This outlines the papers we took and the internships and jobs I got to make my decision. I knew I needed to do at least 2 internships in my degree, and I knew from my peers and my mentors that I should try a construction and a consulting one in order to try and decide what I wanted to do for my grad role. As you can see where I've highlighted in red, we only did 4 transport specific papers, and then additionally I did my research project in the transport sector on autonomous vehicles. So at a glance of the degree itself, very little was transport based. Therefore, when I went into it, I originally thought I would become an environmental engineer because I have a strong interest in sustainability and the environment. So I focused my construction internship on earthworks and environmental management. Next slide. So I got an internship with HICS on the Milldale development site, which is a large residential and commercial development where we were converting farmland and old quarries into buildable land. I learned a lot from the environmental engineer I worked under, but I mainly enjoyed seeing the development plans come together and seeing how what we were doing helped shape the community up north. This kind of planted a seed into my desire to want to work in a field where I could see what I was working on making an impact into the community. Next slide. So going into 3rd year, I still thought environmental engineering was my future. So I took both environmental electives and I looked for internships for the next summer in that field. However, in 3rd year itself, that's where we kind of started dabbling into transport papers. These were mainly focused on geometrics and transport modelling, but in the papers itself, it talked a lot about the environmental, social and economic impacts that these things had. So when I applied for my consulting internship, I applied early in the year. I originally applied for the advisory and environmental role, but by the time the interview had come, I had developed a strong interest in transport. And in the interview, we got into a discussion about transport, and me and the interviewer talked most of the time about how it shaped communities and how it played a big part in our current infrastructure, especially in Auckland. And originally I thought I was an idiot and I blew it. But that discussion ended up leading into them offering me a transport internship role. So that was a blessing in disguise. I still, however, wanted to be fairly broad with my experience in that internship, as I still wasn't really sure what being a civil engineer in transport was. So I asked to do some geotechnical work and some water pump work as well to see if I liked that. But I found I enjoyed the transport projects I was working on a lot more. I learned CAD skills, which helped me understand design, and I was part of projects which were in the news and that I could see being built. one of the projects specifically in that internship was the Hill Street intersection, where for the consultation part of the project, me and another intern collated feedback from the community on what was important to them in the redesign of it. So we took this back, and with the team, we developed several options based on what the community asked for and what would work. And that project was quite important in showing me how what I design has safety, time efficiency, and economic impacts on the communities it's in, which really aligns with my interests the most. So by the end of that internship, I decided to do transport and spent my last year doing full transport electives and working part-time in my internship role. Next slide. So in my role now, I work on a variety of projects. So one I've laid out here is train station layouts. So ensuring there's sufficient space and level of service for train users, undertaking pedestrian modeling. I've been involved with geometric road design, such as Highgate, providing bridge access to connect different communities together, and even fire life safety analysis of Auckland CRL to ensure all users have safe exits in emergencies and emergency services can access the stations. So this is a really broad range of projects and stakeholders. Next slide. So I'm still learning more of what transport has to offer. Oh, keep clicking through it. Didn't realize that's what it did. But in my 3 years of working in the transport sector, I've been involved with all of these subsectors, most of which I didn't know about until I actually started working in the field. So if any of these look like it interests you, I'd really recommend talking to someone in that field, looking on LinkedIn, or just applying for an internship in that field and seeing kind of where that interview takes you. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. I can really relate to your point about thinking you blew the interview. I remember back when I was applying for jobs, similar kinds of experiences, and yeah, you realize that it's just about meeting people and making connections and hoping for the best. All right, our next speaker is Shali Mazari.
Hi everyone, I'm currently a transport planner in the Integrated Network Planning team at Auckland Transport. Unlike Julia and Michael before, I've had a really strange introduction into a career at of transport and planning. So could you please go to the next slide? Thanks. So from this, you can probably tell that it was a straightforward sort of pathway into transport, but that's not actually the case. This is how it actually went down. So I had a mishmash of subjects that I liked at school. And then at uni, I decided to do an LLB BCom conjoint at Auckland because it kind of aligned with what I was interested in, and also because both my mum and dad, they studied law and they didn't end up doing law. So it made me think that, oh, law is a pretty flexible sort of pathway to various other things. So with that law mindset, I decided that, okay, for a career, I'll probably end up doing law. So I applied to all these grad programs across the country, mostly public sector, but also some law firms. And I also did my legal professionals to make me a bit more employable. So when I got the gig as a grad at Auckland Transport, I was told I would be joining them as a legal grad. And I was even asked which sort of legal side I'd like to be in, and I chose corporate. So cut to Feb 2020, when during our orientation days at AT, on day one, I introduced myself to everyone as I'm the legal grad. And then on day two, when we actually got to catch up with our teams, I found out I was actually a strategic land use and spatial management grad. And I was like, what is planning? That was my first introduction to planning. And very strange pathway, but it is what it is. After that very strange placement in the land use planning section, I decided to give the transport planning side a go. And that's where I finally found my feet in the world of transport, and I haven't looked back. Next slide, please. So although my title is transport planner at AT, it's kind of more policy and strategy. So these are just a few of the things I've worked on across the, while I've been at AT since 2020. When I was initially in the land use planning team, I worked on a transport land use integration research thing with some other young professionals. And it was a great kind of dipping my toes into the whole world of planning because I had zero experience in it. It gave me a basic foundation in what it all is. And then when I moved on into my current team, we did some transport planning things, but there was a lot of other stuff we were also picking up, which was policy and planning for the rest of the organization. So I helped my manager with the AT statement of intent, and this is a statutory document which that we have to do once a year that lays out what we plan to achieve in the next year, as well as benchmarks and performance measures on how far we came, how far we achieved it or how we exceeded these targets. The other two more transporty things I've worked on were the 2018 census report, and also, you may have heard of it lately, Auckland's draft parking strategy. It's been in the news. As the statement of intent is a bit more organization related, and the parking strategy is still in progress. I'm not going to talk too much on that, but what I picked up most of, what I found most interesting and informative was actually the 2018 census report. Could you please go to the next slide, Hamish? Thank you. So the reason I found this very interesting was because it just set like a foundation for why we do what we do. The census, initially I just thought, oh, it's just a survey, and I've filled out 2 or 3 censuses in my time, and I just thought it's just the government wanting to know what we're doing, where we're doing it. But there are actually all these insights you can pick up from the data that is collected. You see where people live, where they travel for work or education, what their travel modes are, and that is kind of the basis on which we plan for the future. So this is not just transport planning, but it's also spatial planning for housing and stuff going forward. So these are just a couple of the insights from the brochure that I helped create. You can find out more about this at the website below, www.at.gov.nz/census. So I think this is a great project, and just understanding the needs of Auckland, especially that since it's growing at this insanely rapid pace, and we have to try and keep up with demand as well. So if we can plan as forward as we can, then we can kind of catch up with everything that's taking place. Thanks, Hamish. Next slide, please. So these are my key learnings from my time at AT. The most foundational, the important thing would be, don't box yourself into a single profession or job title. I mean, I'm a great example of that. I thought I'd be doing law. I thought I would, go into the legal profession and be, typing up court documents, all of that, or going to court. But actually, I am enjoying what I'm doing. It's research, it's policy, it's strategy. It's so, all the skills, whatever you learn from uni, it's not just the content that you learn as part of your degree, it's also those life skills. It's the perseverance, the teamwork, as much as we all loathes team assignments at uni. So these are those skills that you really take forward with you in your career. This next one is, sometimes things don't work out, so give it a shot. So that, just because things don't go in your favor as you think whatever you think is best for you at the time. That's not always the case. You learn and you grow. You might even surprise yourself with how capable you actually are. So I thought that, what am I doing in the planning space? But I've actually learned a lot, and I've been able to assist the various teams I've been in, the projects I've been in, with a totally different perspective coming in. And so basically there's no harm in giving things a shot. So you just avoid regret later on. The third one is keep an open mind. So when I found out I was being put into planning, I just took it on as a challenge rather than asking to be reassigned or wondering if it was a mistake. It got a bit tricky, especially in the pandemic, but you just persevere, and that just also makes you more resilient and builds you up as a person. Don't shy away from learning new things. When I did my written task at the AT Assessment Center, I was given all these files and maps and things, and I had no idea what to do with them because I've only been, focused on law. This is the law. This is the statute you have to look at. This is the law. This is how you do it. But because they just had the same, someone decided that they'd have the same question and task for both the planners and the lawyers. So I shoved them aside back then, but little did I know that 3 years on, I'd be creating maps in GIS. So there are all these skills that you learn. So just be ready to learn new things as well. And finally, the next slide is luck. So with the other 4 things, they will help you get to where you need to go, but there's always this element of luck that you can't always count on, but it does kind of help you sometimes feel like it's just the right fit. So it was, luck in being misassigned to planning, luck in taking that leap into checking the transport planning side of things, and luck in finding my full-time spot and role in the team I'm in. So the other things are important, but just if you persevere and you work hard enough, you might just get that little element of luck as well. And it can all together pan out into something wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelale. That was really, really good. I like your kind of Maslow's hierarchy of transport planning lessons. It's really unique. And also another comment you raised, which is so important, is about kind of the importance of data, understanding who our customers are. Really good point. All right, our next speaker is Emily Frew.
Cool, thanks Hamish. Kia ora everyone. Yeah, my name's Emily Frew. I'm a transport planner at Mott MacDonald, and I started at Mott's back in February, so I've been in this role now for about 6 months. There's a bit of a double meaning to my presentation today because I can never shy away from the opportunity to make a pun. So first purpose is that I wanted to get across that sort of not following the traditional path, sort of similar to what Shelale was just talking about. Not following the traditional path of transport planning is possible and can be really useful. It's a multidisciplinary field, so a range of skills and perspectives is really valuable. And the second purpose, sort of what I wanted to talk about was sort of about what transport planning is, or at least what we do at Mott's. And the hint here is that having too many roads calls for better transport planning, because I'm sure, as many of you are very aware, building more and more roads continuously is not the future of transport planning. Slide 2, please, Hamish. So this is just a summary of my journey into transport planning, which has involved a bit of study, working in New Zealand as a librarian, and then working as a nanny in London, and doing some more travel, and then coming back and doing a bit more study. So yeah, a key takeaway from this is it's taken me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. But I've always been drawn to roles where I could do a bit of research and writing and be creative, and roles which also benefited my community in some way. So my interest in urban planning in particular started really when I moved overseas, and I was living in a city like London, which on the one hand has got very developed transport infrastructure and housing and everything else, but then also having to navigate that city with 2 small children in tow made me very aware of how cities are designed for a particular type of person a lot of the time, and how they could potentially be designed differently with better outcomes. So during that time, I read a lot about urban planning, and those books down there and that podcast were one of my favourites as well. And then when I came back to New Zealand, I did a postgraduate diploma in planning at Massey, and that as part of that, I did a research component where I asked Aucklanders about how their travel behaviour changed during lockdown. And that was my first sort of introduction to understanding, I suppose, what behaviour changes and how when we have a big event or something happens in our lives that sort of interrupts our schedules, it sort of makes you rethink your behaviour and thinks about potentially how you can make changes. So yeah, main points of this slide really is non-traditional route, all good. Get a lot of different skills, and you just need to pursue your interests really and follow what you're passionate about. And also put your work on your CV, top tip. If you didn't know that already. So that research project I just added to my CV, and yeah, next slide, thanks Hamish. So yeah, this is a little summary, very basic summary of what my role at Mott as a transport planner involves sort of day to day. So this is more kind of to understand the general kind of frameworks that we work within. So the main thing really is that transport planners often work within the decide and provide paradigm these days rather than the predict and provide model. So it means you sort of decide on and envision the future that you want, and then you figure out how to make that happen as opposed to just forecasting. Another framework we work within a lot is the triple access system, which is the little triangle on the right there, which I won't go into too much detail about, but it basically frames transport as a means to gain access to something. So when you're planning transport, you're always thinking about how this is going to improve someone's access to what they need. And as one of our colleagues overseas says quite a lot, transport planning shouldn't be called transport planning, it should just be called access planning, because that's essentially what we're trying to achieve. And then the other sort of side of that is behaviour change, which is sort of a way of thinking about travel as a type of human behaviour that's influenced by lots of different factors. So our environment, our day-to-day activities, age, gender, etc. So behaviour change is a way that we sort of think about why people travel the way they do, and by understanding why, and that involves data and surveys and all of that sort of stuff, we can influence or try and influence change through behaviour change strategies. So the work that I've been involved in to date has been helping clients to develop plans for transport systems and then using behaviour change strategies that ultimately achieve the outcomes that they want, such as fewer greenhouse emissions, greater equity of access, etc., etc. And these clients are often government agencies, private developers, local councils. Yeah. Slide 4, thanks Hamish. So just to give you a bit more of an idea of what a behaviour change program might look like in practice, I'm currently working on a new high density transport plan for a high density housing development that's being proposed in Auckland. And we're trying to find a solution to how transport will be managed, particularly parking, because you can't have everyone in that new development driving. It will be chaos. So one of the solutions that we've been looking at is this idea of a mobility hub, and these are essentially transport interchanges that might be near a bus stop or train station, but they also have higher travel options as well, like e-bikes, scooters, and then depending on the location, you also have other facilities like might be a post office, cafe, chemist, community garden even, that deliver these kind of further community outcomes like more green space and places for children to play and give the place a bit of a buzz. So yeah, we're just thinking about the potential of maybe combining these with parking buildings as well, as a way to kind of encourage people to, if they're going to have to walk to their car, why not just walk a little bit further to supermarket, or just sort of making it easier sort of on the day-to-day to make, because the parking is away from the street, making it easier for people to cycle as well, and making these kind of communities less car dominated. So that's kind of an example, I suppose, of a kind of idea, and a lot of what I've been working on is just kind of coming up with the concepts and then trying to think about the ways that we could achieve potentially these different strategies for getting people to rethink how they move about, and trying to kind of create, with the ultimate goal of trying to create more of a low carbon neighbourhood and these kind of sustainable futures that we all want. Next slide, please, Hamish. So yeah, I've sort of touched on this a bit, but these are the skills that I use sort of day to day in my work. A lot of research, so that involves researching behaviour change solutions and things that have been done overseas. Writing, so a lot of the time we're writing to convince, because there's a lot of plans and planning, and you have to convince people that your plan is the best plan. Critical analysis, that involves looking at a lot of data and thinking about how things are going to apply to a New Zealand context and what's going to work and what's not, and being quite aware of your own blind spots as well. That's really important. Communication with your colleagues and then also with clients. So we present a lot, and I've helped facilitate some workshops. So yeah, being confident and being articulate helps a lot. I've put Te Reo Māori there because consultation and collaboration with mana whenua is becoming increasingly important, and understanding how to align projects with Māori outcomes. So yeah, having an understanding of te ao Māori and tikanga is really helpful. Being able to speak some te reo Māori is also a great look, and being open to learning and not afraid to ask questions and get things wrong is great. Maths, I've just put that there. That shouldn't scare you if you're an engineer, but it scared me at first. So yeah, I still rely on Excel quite heavily for that. And lastly, I put listening and creativity, two separate points, I guess. Listening, just yeah, being aware of your own blind spots, and being able to understand and accommodate a range of different perspectives is important. And I guess a point here as well I wanted to make was that a lot of these skills I learnt in my degree for sure, but there's a lot in there that kind of comes from, I guess, my wider experience. You know, sometimes even my nanny skills come into the work that I do, just being able to understand that behaviour is can be explained by underlying factors. You don't just treat the symptoms, you treat the cause, as you do often with kids. Yeah, and also your differences and experiences often set you apart, because you're able to kind of bring a new perspective to problems. Cool, and last slide, please, Hamish, thanks. Yeah, so these are a few more things that I thought every transport planner should know going into it. Biggest one, yeah, ask questions, ask people to fill you in and ask for clarification. There's a lot of acronyms in planning. I kept a list from the beginning, and I still kind of check back on that sometimes. But yeah, when in doubt, Google is your best friend. I Google my way through life. So yeah, Google's great. Yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're constantly learning. And then that last quote, there's a quote from Voltaire that Mott uses quite a lot for planning transport futures, but I think it kind of sums up what I think what working in a consultancy is like, or at least sort of how it's been for me so far, which is that you sort of have to get used to that feeling of not really knowing what you're doing 100% of the time, and not hemming yourself in. Sort of, yeah, like Shelale said, like you don't want to box yourself in, because this is the time to learn lots and to change. And yeah, you just have to embrace that feeling of being challenged and uncertain, because that means, yeah, you're always open to new opportunities and new learning experiences. So yeah, on that note, now I'm here, everybody. Thank you for listening, and best of luck with your futures.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Emily. It was really, yeah, I agree with that last point about the kind of uncertainty and just making it work no matter what.
Yep.
All right, and our last speaker for tonight is Lewis.
Thank you very much, Hamish. So I'm a senior transportation engineer working at Abley, which is a fantastic little company of about 80 people. And I work in the road safety space, which is a bit heavy. It focuses on reducing deaths and serious injuries across the network, both the New Zealand network and internationally more recently. So I'll start by saying that I was a mechanical engineer or a mechanical engineering student, so I'm a little bit different coming into this field again. I know that a couple of people mentioned that they've got slightly different backgrounds, and I will say just this next part, if you are a mechanical engineering, you'll very quickly pick up that I'm not an expert of engineering design or building services, but as we'll go, you'll find out more. So in engine design, if you say that an adiabatic cooling could be used to mitigate fluctuating pressure differentials, people will think you're an amazing expert. In building services engineering, if you say that you can use a 10 kilowatt extraction fan to regulate fire risk in a 10 cubic meter complex, people will clap their hands and think that you know everything. But if you're a transportation engineer and you think you can say to people that you can put in a roundabout at a location and it's going to have a very small impact on congestion and a massive impact on safety, people are going to absolutely lose your mind. Now, one of the reasons for this is that unlike all other fields in engineering where you've only got a few specific experts, anyone that drives a car will tell you that they are a transport engineering expert. So we've got, there's some real competition out there with just the general public. So with all that in mind, why do we love what we do? Why do we love transportation engineering? Because it's not just engineering. It's the study of people, it's the study of communication, and more than anything, it's the study of common sense. And sometimes it's those really simple elements of transportation that need to be communicated to people over and over again, and you need to work out the right way of communicating them and getting that message across. And it may not sound as interesting as it is, but there's really fascinating and amazing ways you can think of doing that. So if we rewind a few years back when I was a third year wide-eyed engineering student looking for jobs in all the wrong places, I was applying for everything. I put my application out to everything. If there was a 2-hour-a-week job for an engineer on student job search, you can bet that my application was going in through the letterbox to try and get that. Fortunately, this worked out really well for me in the end because I ended up getting an interview at Auckland Transport, which was the first company that I worked for out of uni. And I would highly recommend putting together as much effort as you can into your interview. I actually put together about 140 slides of answers to possible questions that could come up, which is just crazy and mental, I know. But if any question they asked me, I knew exactly what I was going to say to it. There was one time where they asked me, what is your biggest weakness? And I could give them my top 20 weaknesses, I was just across the board on that one. So definitely worth putting the effort in to get the job that you want. And I was very lucky. I sat down at AT with fantastic managers there. They're still there, Michael Brown and Irene Tees, and I just remember feeling really inspired about road safety when Michael said there was, you could have the opportunity to reduce deaths and serious injuries across the network. That was a real turning point where I thought I'd be doing lots of random jobs with different purposes. That gave me some purpose. At the time, I thought I'd be working on buses, and I was like, how many people really fall over on a bus and get killed or seriously injured? But I learned there's a lot more to transportation engineering and to Auckland Transport than just buses. So yeah, please don't ever tell Michael Brown that I thought that he just worked in the bus space. So what do I do now after all this time? So I work on training material a lot of the time. So I put together training material for low and middle income country that we're working with. And what that is training up their trainers so they can go off and train people in road safety. So it goes all the way from the basics. And we've got about 60 hours altogether of training time. Where we're actually sitting down, and for a lot of that, I'll be the one yabbering on as I am now, telling people about road safety engineering and building up their skills. And I really enjoy that work. I've gone from someone that would be terrified to present. I still am a bit terrified to present right now, but someone that was terrified to present to someone that actually really enjoys that work and very rewarding. I also volunteer a little bit outside of work here, but I volunteer in another lower middle income country, and I've been working with a group of really inspiring people that are working to reduce deaths and serious injuries on Nepal's roads. So yeah, they're really early in the process, and they had a lot of questions when I came on board, but it's really good to see them getting inspired and really wanting to get out there and do what they can. I've been working on road safety evaluations. So if you put in some sort of road safety treatment, be it a roundabout, roadside barrier, or raised intersection, something along those kind of lines, you want to know that you're actually getting your bang for your buck, that people are actually being a lot safer and no longer getting killed and seriously injured. So we do evaluations looking at crashes before and after, and there's a lot of complexity around that I will not bore you with right now. You can probably tell I find it really, really interesting, but yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get across here is there's a lot more to transportation engineering and transportation in general than you could really realize. But yeah, we're also developing a crash reporting process. So when a fatal crash occurs in one of these low middle income countries I'm talking about, we've developed a process for what they do, what questions they should be asking themselves, and how do they go from the crash occurring to actually making some recommendations that are going to stop crashes occurring, not just necessarily at that site, but across their whole network if it's a systematic failure, which it so often is. And then I know that one of my fellow presenters mentioned maps and how important they are to transportation engineering. Get into mapping. If you're going to get into transportation, get into mapping. You're going to absolutely love it. And it's everything that's a transportation problem usually starts out with having geospatial elements where there's a lot of problems across the board. In fact, I think a lot of the presenters have showed maps, and yeah, get into mapping. I won't go on too much about that. So that's me, but I did want to share a few tips before you go out into the world. And Hamish, please interrupt me if I yabber on for too long. But the first one being around company culture. So someone once said to me something really important when I started my career, and they said, don't be friends with your colleagues. They're colleagues, not friends. And this was really important because it was the worst advice anyone has ever given me in my entire life. Your colleagues are not just your colleagues. Absolutely go out, have a drink with them. We're engineers. Go out, play some board games. At Abley, we do I'm part of the committee actually for putting together events. So I'll put together an event once every other week, whether it'll be squash or it'll be board games or it'll be D&D last week, for God's sake, just anything. But just be friends. Your life doesn't need to stop as soon as you enter the company door. It keeps going, and it can be really rewarding to be there. So absolutely do that. And then another thing is, I'll skip that one. I'll go on to gamification. So I don't know if you've heard about gamification, but if you've ever used an app and it comes up with a little ringing noise and it shows you some nice thing on your screen and you get a buzz run to your head and you feel like you've done good, that app designer has used gamification. But the good news is it's not just to get you hooked on apps. You can use it yourself. It's trying to make medial tasks or boring things more interesting and give you a sense of reward and purpose and a journey towards not completion, but give you reassurance that you're getting somewhere. So I'd look into gamification if I were you. Work on what you enjoy, I'd say, is another recommendation that I give. This sounds really simple, but I'd rather do 50 hours a week on something that I enjoy than 30 hours a week on something that I hate any day of the week, like land development. But yeah, so just do what you love and try and find the energy, and it will give you energy by doing what you love. And work for a company that respects work-life balance is the other one. We're not lawyers. We're not involved in some pyramid scheme. We should be looking for companies that really do value us as people. And the amount of times that my company have gone out of their way to say, take some bloody time off, has just been fantastic. So definitely find a company that respects your time and wants you to get the most out of life and not just get the most out of you. I've already covered this next one, but interviews, put your heart and soul into it, really go for it. you don't want to be walking out of that interview room being like, this company was fantastic and I failed. You want to be walking out of that interview thinking, this company's fantastic, I nailed it, and just see what happens. Of course, like another presenter said, it does come down to luck sometimes, so don't never feel too bad, but definitely put the effort in. And the last one is, and I can see Hamish's hand is up to stop me, so I'll be very quick. It's be passionate. I don't know if you noticed, but yeah, you can get a long way with just putting some passion in, and you'll get so much more out. And I'll end it there. Thanks, Hamish.
Thanks, Lewis. There were some really, really good points, kind of lessons learned, and the being friends with your colleagues, I think, was a really good and interesting one. So move to the Q&A portion now. We can run over a little bit past 6. Hopefully that's okay with some of the speakers that might be able to stay on in case anyone's got any questions. The first one in our kind of Q&A panel is for you, Shelale. So the comment saying, liked how you've kind of taken your law background and applied it to the policy aspect of transport planning. And the question's asking about what's your the kind of continuous development that you've done to try and like upskill in transport planning, if any.
I haven't done any official courses as such. I've just it's such a steep learning curve for me coming from a zero planning background, but it's just experience right now. It's just getting into the nitty gritty of some of these bigger transport projects, or just sometimes I even, when I have some time, and my colleagues do too, I just sit down and we have a chat about their experiences, what the projects they've worked on, what they've found tricky. But I'm also sort of unofficially upskilling in GIS. So I've picked up some skills, I've got the software, and I've got another colleague teaching me how to do it. And then I think when I have a bit more bandwidth and free time, I will actually look into picking up some more, picking up some courses on LinkedIn or just online or something, just to upskill in these areas. But maybe down the track, maybe a Masters of Public Policy, but just it's still up in the air right now.
Thanks, Shelale. So I've got like an open question, so anyone feel free to answer. So what would you like to see universities, companies, central local government, Engineering New Zealand, a transportation group, or others do differently to help school students, uni students or grads be aware of transport as a career path, as well as the kind of need for those different perspectives in transport planning and engineering?
I think they should go after more arts grads, but I can only speak from personal experience. Yeah, I think as well, I think I was quite lucky in my degree where I think maybe it was just the nature of that paper, but a lot of the papers were sort of very broad in terms of what you could look at, and like transport was always covered in every paper. So that was something that kind of came up a lot. Yeah.
Thanks, Emily. Anyone else wants to try answer that one? So what can we do to try and kind of reach high school and university students? You're on mute, Julia.
No, my thing's just up. I'd like to see something like the Wonder Project, but specifically for transport for school kids. I know they do one for, well, Engineering New Zealand Wonder Project, go into schools and do design challenges. I think it'd be quite good to engage kind of younger students and get them interested in like specific transport projects so that they know it from a younger age. They can kind of be aware of what they can go into and what they can study, maybe have a slightly clearer idea before kind of getting into uni.
Thanks, Julia. All right, so someone's just asked about networking, whether the networking helped you significantly in kind of getting to where you are in your careers today. So anyone want to kind of talk to their kind of networking experience as they started out?
Hey, I could probably speak to the zero networking. I've always shied away from just those sort of things. And as a friend of mine, a colleague, Maddie, she says that networking and free pizza got her her first job. So there's always a bonus to it. So sometimes, you know, it's good to put yourself out there and just experience all these things. I mean, I can say that from my experience, I didn't, but I wish I had. That's one of the regrets I do have at uni, but it won't hold you back either if you try in the other sides of things. But yeah.
Thanks,
I would
Shali.
just add to that as well that networking doesn't necessarily mean just having to go to events. It's just building your social network and also obviously your professional network. So just be really driven and careful around what you say and what you do in every situation, because you're always building your personal brand and the image people have of you. So for me, a past boss recommended me to Abley, my current company, and that's how I actually got the job here. So yeah, so that is a form of networking. That's people helping you along the way, and definitely everyone's going to be looking to help you. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it because they're all busy people, but generally most people want to help you and get you where you want to go.
Good point, Lewis. Michael, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. I was just going to say that with companies, they've always got large numbers of people applying for internship and graduate roles. And I think one way you can set yourself apart is through using networking to your advantage. A lot of companies are at career fairs, or they'll run events in the university. I think there's a lot of value in getting names of people from those companies. So, for example, after talking to so-and-so from this company, I learned about this company and its great work culture. I think you having that sort of shows that you've got a real interest in working at the company and have gone above and beyond to do that. So I think by name dropping and sort of mentioning events in like cover letter applications or in those online applications that you do, that can really come in handy.
Good points, Michael. All right, I've got a question here. What is the worst part of your job?
I think one of the hardest things about consulting is timesheets, finding places to charge your time to. And there's this real balance between making sure that you're getting involved on work, but not sort of blowing out your budget on projects. So I think it's a real challenge in that consulting space. And I think with time you get better at understanding how long things will take, but it's definitely a challenge.
And I would add to that as well that consultancy is very much a up and down kind of job. And what I mean by that is you're going to have amazing highs and pretty low lows as well. When you get a job come in and you've brought it in yourself, it feels incredible. And then when you're so close to bringing a job in, you think you've got it in the door or a contract in and it falls through, then it can be a pretty hard time. So I suppose, yeah, that would be the one from me.
All right, the last question that we had here, this one was aimed at Emily, but I think all of us are able to answer it. So anyone feel free to jump in. Do you see New Zealand moving towards a more kind of transit-oriented development focus?
Well, I hope so. I think, yeah, well, I think definitely in Auckland, I see it moving towards more transit-oriented development, especially with the new plan changes that mean 6 stories plus around transport stations. And yeah, a lot of the work that we're doing kind of revolves around this future model where everything's going to be built around these kind of key arterial veins and network connections. And, you know, all the research points to having high density areas contributing to better transport outcomes as well. So, yeah.
Oh, we've just had another question come in. So someone's saying that they are a civil engineer focused in temporary works design, and they've always been interested in transportation engineering, but are already a senior level in that field. What are your thoughts of jumping field, and how easy is it to progress? Any other advice? Maybe one of our speakers that's had a bit more of an unconventional path might want to hazard.
Don't know if any of us have really jumped fields.
Yeah, I can say for myself, I started out in the structures asset management space, and for me it was just having a discussion with my manager and saying, look, this is where I'm keen to go to. This is the sort of work I'm keen to get involved with. So I guess the first thing would be asking whether you've got those opportunities within the company you're in now, because that can make things easier. I think as well, like the skills that you develop, regardless of what field you're in, are really valuable wherever you end up. You know, across the industry, there's all these different factions. There's people on the client side for places like Auckland Transport or Waka Kotahi. There's consultants doing the design work, and there's contractors actually getting it done. And if you bring experience from one group into another, then I think there's real value in that. I know for consultants all the time, we're looking at, you know, can this actually be built? And we're also considering things like, you know, what is it that the client is wanting us to give them? So I think having experience in a different background can bring a lot of value. Also, there's a lot of opportunities out there at the moment. So if there's people sort of in roles that you know that you're keen to you know, move into that field, then I'd recommend reaching out to them.
Thanks, Michael. We've just had a question come in. Maybe we'll take this as our last question for the evening, so everyone can go enjoy their dinner. Do you think your qualifications and experience will be easily transferable to practice overseas?
I work quite internationally, so I work in a bit of Nepal in terms of volunteering, done work in Australia and New Zealand. I would say that it 100% is transferable. Pretty much any transportation work. I can see some people nodding, so that's a good sign. Yeah, it's one of those fields that's incredibly transferable. There will be new laws and new rules as you go to a new place, but in general, a lot of the skills and a lot of the software and tools you'll be using, people will use elsewhere as well.
Yeah, to add to that, like a lot of the projects I was working on, like the train station pedestrian modelling, that was all based in Sydney. And the fire life safety stuff I was doing was based in Canada. So I think a lot of, especially in transport consulting, a lot of the projects are very, yeah, transferable and global. And often we get resources from lots of different countries all coming together.
Yeah, I think just to add to that as well, basically every country in the world has engineers on their skill shortage list. There's no shortage of opportunities overseas, and those skills are very transferable.
Thanks, Michael. So we might wrap up there, and maybe if I ask each one of our presenters to maybe close with a final thought or reflection for the people online. Emily.
Oh, on the spot. Thought or reflection. I think, yeah, kind of what I was saying before about not being too worried about where you're going. And I think just putting, yeah, putting 100% effort into what you're doing now, because you don't know where it's going to end up. And yeah, just giving it your best And yeah.
Shelale.
Yeah, just to build on what some of the previous panelists have said, is just follow your passions. Regardless of what your background, your education was, if you're passionate about it, if it sparks that fire for you, go for it and just keep on going until you figure things out properly. I guess that's what I'm doing. Thanks.
Lewis.
I would say diversify your skill range into some sort of software or technology. So for me, it was GIS, which is a mapping software, and a few people have mentioned that, and I've gone on about mapping way too much, but I would say definitely diversify your skills just a little bit. And I think you'll gain a lot from that, because there'll be a lot of experts in the industry, but you don't need to compete in everything. Sometimes you can just have a skill set that's slightly different to everyone else, and that will help you. And if you move to a different place or a different job, then you can use it in different ways. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Michael.
Yeah, I'd say there's so many opportunities and resources out there. There's a lot of organisations like Engineering New Zealand, and also your universities, which run things like career fairs and bring industry into the universities. I think, yeah, just really make the most of those opportunities, and really leverage the connections that you can form from that.
And Julia.
Yeah, similar things. Just try everything. Don't pigeonhole yourself too early or make assumptions or deny yourself opportunities because you don't think it'll be useful in the future. Just try what you can.
All right, thanks everyone. And thanks to everyone online for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session, and the recording will be online. Holly, not sure if the attendees will get sent an email with it. But yeah, thank you for joining, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you to our speakers.
Thanks everyone. See you.